everyone, and welcome back to Oh That Girl Reads, where we read what we love and DNF the rest. I am that girl, your host, Bria, and today we have an agenda. But before we get into today, I have to say I had a killer weekend. Besides all the bullshit that Booktok was putting me through this past weekend, at the time of recording this, I had a pretty good weekend. I met up with one of my bookish friends. I actually met this friend in high school when we did basketball together. She was very good at basketball. I was not. But my friend Dina, over at Dina's Book Nook, I will put all of her information down below. You should definitely go follow her Booktok or Bookstagram. I'm sorry. Yeah, I got to have coffee with her. Got to see her after not seeing her since high school. We kind of like reconnected over our love of books, which is one of the reasons that I really love, this book community, is the fact that it's really brought me together with people that I knew but weren't super close to, and then we as adults we found this like really common ground together, which I think is just really beautiful. So I got to have coffee with her. It was very beautiful. I got to give some books a new home, so that was really nice. Brooke and I tonight are actually going to a concert. If you don't know who Brooke is my baby sister. We're going to go see Card in concert tonight. They're a K-pop group, and I'm so excited to be going to a concert with her. We haven't gone to a concert together in the longest time, like even way before pandemic times, so it's kind of nice, and I'm happy that I get to do something that she's really excited about. I think that's kind of like one of my favorite things about connecting with people and loving people, is the fact that you get to enjoy in their interests, and kind of be exposed to new things. So I'm really excited for her, and excited for her to just have fun tonight. She really deserves it. But first off, before we get into any of the craziness that happened this weekend with Booktok literally pissing me off, let's talk about all the releases that are coming up on August 8th. By the time you guys are watching this, I think it's only a couple of days until these books released. I was blessed enough by Netgalley and each of these books' authors and publishers to get a ARC copy. So thank you to Netgalley and all the publishers for these books in exchange for an honest review. So I figured I would give you guys reviews of these ones before they come out, because I am actually really excited about all of these. I one of them we're going to have a deep talk about, but for the most part I'm really super excited about all of these. So one book that we'll start with, I've mentioned before, and I've actually reviewed back in May on my Instagram. It's The Dark Place by Britney S. Lewis. I love this book. It is, if you like Coraline, if you like Get Out or any of Jordan Peele's work, if you like horror, spooky vibes, suspense, a little bit of time travel with a nice little dash of an innocent romance, I think you would really like The Dark Place. The Dark Place follows teenager Hailey after the death of her brother, and she's trying to kind of deal with this grief and this trauma surrounding her brother's death. But as she's getting further and further from the event, she's also experiencing these weird visions, and she's disappearing. And so she's trying to figure out and piece together why she's disappearing and how she's disappearing, and how this all relates to her brother's death and disappearance. And so it was really good. It was super spooky. I felt like it kind of set me off into this just this horror mode. Now I'm currently reading La Hacienda. I'm also reading Mexican Gothic, things like that. I'm really into the horror vibes. Of course I talked about Southern, but that was the book, The Dark Place. Set it all off for me. That was the book that made me okay, I'm ready for Summerween. I'm ready to just get into all the spooky vibes. It was perfect. And I think it'll be the perfect way, especially if you're not someone who really likes horror, but who wants to be in like a spooky vibe for the fall season. It'll be the perfect book to kind of get introduced to horror in that way. It's not too scary, but it does give you the heebie jeebies. And when I tell you, I rarely ever have moments where I'm like reading a book and I'm like, like there's very rare moments. And this is one of the arcs that I actually read in the past like month or two where I actually was gasping out loud and like, you know, having like actual reactions to it. So it was actually a really enjoyable read. This is Brittany S. Lewis' second YA novel, and I believe she's working on a new project that is I don't think it's adult, but I think at the very least, if it's not adult, it does have like an older cast. I think they're set in college, so I'm really excited about that. Also, just Brittany S. Lewis is just so cool. She's a twihard. She does like West Coast dancing, so if you want a new author to check out, definitely check out Brittany S. Lewis. She's so cool. I also really love that like on TikTok she does these like writing lives or just like these promotional lives where she's talking about her books, but like you can really like get a sense of like who she is and like how she writes. So definitely recommend her. Okay, so the next book that I read was Cruel Seduction by Katee Robert. Okay, so I really enjoy Katee Robert, don't get me wrong. It's just that this particular book pointed out something to me about romance, especially romance that's focused on like spice and like smut, that kind of bothers me, especially in romantasy. And so we'll talk a little bit deeply about that. I touched a little bit on it in the last episode, but if you're just joining me from this episode, don't worry, I'll get into it. But first of all, what is Cruel Seduction about? So Aphrodite, never one too afraid to get her hands dirty, has married Olympus enemy number one, the new Hephaestus. Hephaestus, seeking to secure his place as one of the 13, will do anything to keep his new wife in check, including seducing her ex Adonis. Throw in Hephaestus' alluring best friend Pandora, and you have a messy but sexy game of seduction. So that's essentially what it's about. And you know, one thing that I know about Katee Robert, and I appreciate Katee Robert as like one of my comfort authors, is the fact that she will give you a story that is a good time. Like, it is a good time. It's gonna be like fun, it's gonna be adventurous, it's gonna be smutty and like sexy. But what's happening now with like her Dark Olympus series, which made me critical of her book. And you know, I think when you're trying to do something new with the series, like especially in the way that she's trying to do it, it's going to come in with critique. But what she's trying to do now with the series is take it into more of a plot driven story. And at first, like following the first couples and everything, you really do, it is very much like character focused, and it's very focused on the relationships. You don't really hear too much about Olympus and its instability. Literally, for the most part, what you hear about Olympus in the earlier books is that it's a dark and dangerous place. You can't trust anybody. This is Olympus. Like, there's all these rules that you have to play by, and like it's told a lot of the time throughout the series, but it's never really shown that often in the earlier books. And I feel like in Cruel Seduction, this is like the first, well, the book before Cruel Seduction, it's called Radiant Sin, and that's where you really start to get a real feel of how dangerous Olympus actually is, and how these systems like that are built within Olympus's structure actually creates like these really villainous characters, or it really motivates people to do certain things. I feel like she was trying to touch on that with Eros and Psyche's story. I forgot what their book was called, but I think she really tried to touch on that in that book, but I don't think it was as successful because, again, it was very much character driven. But in Radiant Sin, it was very, very successful, really explaining that. And then, oh yeah, there was another book before that. It was like Helen's and Achilles' story or something like that, and then some other guy, Patroclus. Their story started to kind of set it up. So she was like slowly like moving towards a more plot driven thing. And I think like with Cruel Seduction is where we hit the snag. It's kind of where we kind of fell back into the pattern of like, oh, this place is so dangerous. This place is like, Olympus is so dark and things like that. And I think we tried to do that, but I also think there were so many people involved in the relationship that she had to spend so much time establishing this relationship that you couldn't really get much of like the essential plot needed to further advance the fall of Olympus, even though this book is also about like the instability of Olympus now that they have this new power play. And like there's just certain things that just it's kind of starting to fall apart. And so like for me it became like a 3-star read because I feel like now it's time to really like tighten up the plot. It's time to tighten up the plot and then also expand the page count. And I think because like she's moving towards this more of like a romantasy feel rather than like a romance with a touch of fantasy. Now she's moving into this space where it's like a fantasy with romance. So like a full balanced romantasy. Right now it's not super balanced, and because it's not super balanced, I think she needs more page counts. Like this book was like 380 pages. Like it needed more. Like if we're going to lead into this this space and we're gonna get really into this plot, which I'm really excited about, she needs more pages. Stop making these tiny ass books. Like, hold on. Okay, so she has these books. So this is Electric Idol. This is like 370. Okay, this is how like she needs like a chunky boy like this. How big are you? Yeah, one, Lauren Asher, there was no reason why Final Offer had to be this big, but she needs like 500 pages. Katee Robert is officially at the point where she needs 500 plus pages because like one, we're in these relationships. Like Cruel Seduction features a polyamorous couple with 4 people in it. 4 people, 4 point of views, which introduces some other problems, right? So we have 4 people with 4 point of views, and you're trying to connect all 4 people together romantically, and you're trying to do that over 380 pages. Okay, that could be done over 380 pages, but then you have this really intense plot in the background that has multiple moving parts that's happening spread out in the point of view of 4 people, and it creates this like disconnect where the plot isn't even addressed half the time, especially because like Katee Roberts like a pro with the smut, so she's mostly using that page time for sex scenes. Like it's not working. It's like not working anymore, and I feel like a bitch, but like I just feel like it didn't work in this one. And then so that was one problem, right? But my next issue with Cruel Seduction, and this is kind of a spoiler in a way, but I felt like, so Aphrodite, there's Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Adonis, and then Pandora. And Pandora and Aphrodite have this like really interesting chemistry and dynamic and tension going on, even though like Pandora is meant to be Hephaestus' like best friend, and they care deeply for each other, but they're not like romantic with each other. And so I feel like because of that, it almost like pushes the woman romantic, the sapphic romantic relationship to the back burner in favor of like the relationship between the two men and Aphrodite. And so like there's this like big scene which pisses me off. This scene pisses me off. So we're going to talk about this in so many different ways right now. But there's this big scene where a character is their life is threatened and it's really traumatizing. All of the other characters in the polycule are trying to come together to help her essentially get out of shock and work through it. And so they call everyone, and everyone but Pandora goes. And then I still don't understand how it led to this. But then it just became a thing of like, oh, in order for two of the characters, to work out their conflict, you guys just need to fuck it out. And I remember, like, I knew where it was going because, like, every author, every, like, fantasy person, every romance person, they all do this. And I'm not saying that, like, sex isn't a valid way of dealing with trauma, because that's not what I'm saying at all. I think, like, when you're writing a story, the way you use sex to deal with trauma can work against you. And I just felt like it just really worked against the whole entire thing. I think it just made the conclusion of this couple being together not make a single drop of sense to me, because nothing got resolved. In all honesty, nothing. They take this moment where, you know, Aphrodite's like really vulnerable, and instead of using it to create an intimate scene, just an intimate scene, the moment is turned super sexual and like used for a threesome. And I think, like, yeah, I wanted the freaking threesome, but like, why was it predictably after like something traumatizing? I don't understand. And so I think my problem with that is, like, you know, it happens, like, whatever. I was literally tensed up the whole entire time I was reading it, because it's kind of like, of course, like, right when they were at the point of like breaking through and having an intense back and forth conflict, they just shifted into just fucking each other. And I was like, dude, like, what? And to be honest, it makes me feel like Katee Robert doesn't know how to write conflict. Like, doesn't know how to have her characters work through that conflict without that sex in there, which, I mean, it almost feels unfair to say, because like I felt like some of her other characters did really well in talking through things, but I don't know, that scene just didn't sit right, and it didn't feel like it transitioned right, and it impacted the story, because like literally I'm like, okay, all of a sudden you guys have all of these like intense feelings, and you guys like are claiming this like deep connection or this desire to be together, but I actually don't see how. I don't see how. I don't actually see how like any of you guys work through anything. You guys all kind of just seem to trauma bond, really. I don't know, it just didn't feel super fulfilling. But I will say that I am excited about like how complicated the plot's gonna be. I really hope that she gives herself more space, because I was looking at the next few books that she has planned, and a lot of them involve multiple people. And the thing that makes me nervous, especially with how I feel about the threesome scene in this book, is for Eurydice's book, is with Orpheus and I think Charon, something like that. Their story sounds complex as shit, especially because if you've read the first book, he ratted her out to Zeus and almost got her killed. So like at that point, it's like, okay, like, I'm sorry, Katee, but if you tried to have them fuck away the problem, what is the point? Like, what is the point at that point? I don't know. Anyway, I overall though, despite my criticisms, I did give it a 3 stars. And 3 stars just means that I enjoyed it, but I did have a lot to say. Like it just didn't it wasn't working for me in a lot of instances. And yeah, that book wasn't really working for me in that instance. But otherwise I pretty much enjoyed it. I just really, really wish that I got more time with Aphrodite and Pandora because it just felt like their connection was just so rushed and so shallow. And the way that Pandora is characterized, it almost seems like a cop out because we don't really know that much about her. Like, we don't get to connect with her as much for us to be like, oh, okay, it makes sense that, like, you know, she feels this way. And even then, like, Adonis, too seems a little like one note, and I felt like she handled the relationship well. I just felt like it just wasn't fleshed out. Well, do I feel like she handled I feel like she was knowledgeable about the relationship as much as someone who is not polyamorous could say. I felt like she was knowledgeable about it. I felt like she was respectful about it. I don't think I like the trajectory of their relationship or the overall arc of their relationship. I just don't, it just didn't fit well. And it's kind of sad because I was really excited about like the real tension between them. And I felt like I do feel like Hephaestus and Aphrodite spent a lot of time just being like, oh, I hate them, but I want to have sex with them. What's going on? I don't understand these feelings. I don't know. But I did enjoy it despite what it might seem like. Okay, next book. Oh my god. This next book, I'm jealous that you guys get to read it for the first time. I want to go back and read it for the first time over again. I think technically this book is a 5-star read for me. However, I did give it a 4.75 because like it was kind of hard for me to get into it at first. I'm not going to lie. It took me a couple of tries. I actually wasn't sure if I was going to end up reviewing it because it did take me a couple of tries to get past like the first few pages, but then I really got into it. But Between Us by Mhairi McFarlane, I believe I'm pronouncing the first name right. But this book was just so fucking chef's kiss. It was so fucking good. I really wish that I could read this book for the first time over again. I'm actually so jealous of you guys that gets to read this on the 8th. But let me go ahead and read to you a short description of what this book's about. So, when Roisin and Joe join their friends at a country clubhouse for a birthday engagement TV show premiere party, it's like a weird combination of all of them. Tension rises as Roisin questions her relationship. As they watch her boyfriend Joe's new TV drama, she realizes the private things that should have been between them are now shared on the big screen. It begs the question, what other things on the show are inspired by true events? Okay, so the beginning of this book for me was it was a little slow. I didn't quite know where we were going with it. But once I was in this book, you guys, I was in, okay? And like, okay, so what really got me is I really, really cared about these characters. I felt like they were fascinating people. I was just kind of like, you know, Roisin obviously was super interesting. You know, Roisin's friends, Gina, Matthew, you know, just everybody. I can't remember all their names right now, but I felt really interested in all of their dynamic. And like, you know, you get to see like how this group became friends, and it really draws into the question of like, how much are you owed your friends in a way? Like, because Roisin has this like internal battle about like staying with Joe just because like they have a friend group, and that friend group was like really in the trenches together, and they have such a long history. Like they've been friends for years and years and years. And so she's like, well, we're kind of like a stability in the group. Like, we're just known to be together, and like what would happen if we're not together. And she's kind of like going through these things where she's kind of like unraveling these parts of like realizing like, why am I with this guy, and how can I be with this guy, and just like after being in a relationship so long with a person, like looking at them differently, and then thinking about like, what do you owe your friends, and then what do you owe yourself in that situation. And I just felt like being in Roisin's head as she's kind of navigating this was just such an interesting and relatable place to be in. And during the story, like as everything unfolds and you kind of see like what's going on, like what Joe decided to use, like how he manipulates people, and like how he manipulates like Roisin and her feelings, like I don't like, you really start to like get how like she kind of got tangled up in all of this, and especially in relation to like the way she grew up. And you start to like really like, I empathize with her a lot. Like, I've dated a Joe, and it was not pleasant. It was actually the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But I dated someone like that, and it was funny because at a certain point I was starting to recognize a lot of the patterns between like my Joe and the Joe in this book. And I was starting to get nervous. I was like, oh, is this gonna turn into like almost like a cartoon supervillain-esque person? And surprisingly it didn't. Like, even the parts where I was kind of like, oh wow, this is like so intense, like, because it kind of got a little psychological, you know, a little bit thrillery, kind of started to like mimic Joe's show a little bit, which was kind of cool. Even then, like with those kind of elements, it didn't take on like a crazy like, okay, like this, there's no way like someone would act like this, because like literally the person that I was with did shit like that. And it was so crazy like how real it felt and how much I can empathize. But I also didn't feel like, you know, she was a total victim. Like, there was like like she felt very human. And I think that's like what I really really enjoyed about like this whole entire story, is that like everyone felt so human to me. And it was just so great. I really really enjoyed this one. And yeah, guys, all these books come out on August 8th. And so it will be very soon where you guys can enjoy the reads that I have been enjoying over the summer. It's really good books. I'm pretty happy with my reading month, to be honest. Like, I'm not gonna have like a really big reading wrap up month, just because I've literally only read Cruel Seduction in Between Us in the month of July. I started to read La Hacienda, but I don't know. I have to be in like a certain mood and a certain vibe and headspace to really get into it. It's beautiful writing. That there's no question about that. I know that's gonna be a book that I'm going to love. It's just that it's definitely a specific mood that I have to be in so to read it. But I'm really excited about that. But yeah, those were all the books that are going to be coming out in the month of August. I'm super excited about that. But speaking about books about to be launched, let's talk about Emily Henry's new book that's coming out in 2024. Oh my God. Like, you don't even understand. So I was on TikTok, and my mutual Miss Satoria Satray Reads, if you want to follow someone really awesome, she was like, have you guys seen Emily Henry's newsletter? And I was like, no bitch, I'm not on newsletters. Even though I do want to join Satoria's newsletter, and maybe I'll join Emily Henry's, because I actually really do love Emily Henry. But I'm like, no, I'm not on anyone's newsletter, because I just don't do newsletters. I don't do my email box. But maybe I should. Because obviously I'm missing shit. But Emily Henry announced a new book called Funny Story. And I read the premise. and I know that I'm gonna love the shit out of this book. Okay, so it kind of has like a similar vibe to Cruel Seduction, and you'll see why in a second. But let me read it to you. So, what is Funny Story about? Funny Story is about Daphne and her fiance Peter, who are madly in love. They moved back to his childhood hometown where Peter constantly tells the story of how they met. All is well until Peter realizes he's actually in love with his childhood best friend Petra. Now, Daphne is stranded in Wanning Bay, Michigan, and even though she has no friends or family, she does have her dream job as a children's librarian, so at least that's one point in her favor. Now, with barely any money, there's only one potential roommate who could possibly understand what she's going through: Petra's ex, Miles. Despite the fact that Miles happens to be Daphne's polar opposite, after they form a friendship which may or may not involve posting misleading images of their summer together, Daphne realizes that she might have done the craziest thing of all: fallen for her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex. No biggie. When I tell you that as soon as I'm done recording, I am hitting the pre-order button, I'm there. I am debating though, because I kind of want to hold out for signed copies. Oh, but I just want to pre-order it. I just want to know that I have it, because you know what's happening right now? I tried to get my hands on Fourth Wing, which I've given up on. I actually don't give a fuck about it anymore. Like, to be honest, like, that was kind of a book that had to get me while the hype was like hyping. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is the type of book that has to have the attention. I need to automatically have it, or you're not going to get a sale out of me for a book like that. But with Fourth Wing, like, I couldn't get my hands on it and I gave up, and I don't care anymore. And then Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, I have been trying to hunt down. I literally put my name on Barnes and Nobles, like everything, for like a wait list. I haven't gotten it, and I'm really annoyed because I actually really do want to read this one. So I know with like Emily Henry, like, if I don't put in a pre-order, I'm not gonna get it. I just know it. I know it. If I don't do it, I won't get it. And so, like, but doesn't that sound so good? That sounds like such a fucking good book. And like, oh my gosh. I kind of want to do like, oh my god, wait, what if I just do a whole like reading Emily Henry books video or something like that? I don't even know, because I really loved Book Lovers. Book Lovers was actually one of my top reads of 2022. I think it was, did I rank them? I don't know if I ranked them in order, but it was definitely one of my top reads of 2022. I haven't read People We Meet on Vacation or Beach Read. I feel like people were like really critical of those two, but I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not really super drawn to them. And I have Happy Place, but I haven't read it yet either. But I love Emily Henry. I started reading Happy Place, but then my mood changed, and then I started reading Priory of the Orange Tree, I think, with my friend Dina. Was that around the same time? I can't remember. I started reading some really intense fantasy book, though, in the middle of me reading Happy Place. And it's not because I didn't like Happy Place. It's just that my mood switched, and I was like, it's time for me to read something different. But that is like, I think that's like such a sick premise. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, ooh. I also love that line. Daphne realizes she might have done the craziest thing of all: fallen for her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex. No biggie. I just think that was so good. I just know this is gonna be so good. I'm so excited. I'm like so fucking excited for this book. You can't tell me shit. Can I possibly look on I'm like, do you guys ever like go to Netgalley and you're like, I wonder what I can... Honestly, my ratio is probably not good enough for a book like that. Yeah, I know my ratio isn't good enough for like a book that big. Or if they would even like send, yeah, they're not even sending it to the galleys. To Netgalley. That was like a pipe dream. Speaking of Netgalley, I've been seeing a lot more lately about people posting about just like joining Netgalley and then not realizing that like you don't really get approved for things right away, and then sometimes you just get approved for things all at one time. And so I think I might put together like a post or something, like maybe on TikTok, just like how I actually handle like my Netgalley things, because I kind of knew, because I saw someone else make a post about this before I joined Netgalley, about how overwhelming it is when you get an influx of like books to read. And so I kind of already knew about that, and I made a system and paced myself out, because I don't want reading to become a job, in the sense that I feel like a strong obligation to leave a review for something, or I have to read something in order to do X, Y, and Z. And so I really do pace myself when it comes to like arc books and things like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm of the belief that you don't have to review every book that you get. Like, because I mean, think about it this way. Even back in the early days of like BookTube, they were sent books all the time, and they weren't contractually obligated to review the book. It was just like, here's the book. You might just even show it in a video or something like that. So, but I do think it is really helpful to the authors. But anyway, so I have to talk to you guys about something before we winding this episode down. We have to talk about something. By the time you guys are listening to this drama has probably passed, but it was so embarrassing. And like, some people are like, oh, why is it embarrassing to us? Like, you know, I'm not claiming that. Someone was really funny. They're like, there's Booktok and then there's me. I don't do what Booktok does. And honestly, I have to say, I think I might start claiming that a little bit. I also can't claim other people's mistakes, but you know, when you're really passionate about a community and you really care about it and you really believe in it, once they start acting up, it's kind of embarrassing, not gonna lie. Especially because Booktok doesn't just make up a certain category, despite everyone's now belief. But essentially, over the weekend, the craziest shit happened. A booktalker by the name of Kiera Lewis, she got really famous off of essentially like promoting the typical like ACOTAR, Sarah J Maas books, like I think she was like really into Colleen Hoover, things like that. And she has this kind of like loud, boisterous personality, and you know, a lot of people like that. They find her comedy and her humor funny. And so she amassed a following really quickly, especially for someone who's a Black woman, you know, like that's kind of unheard of. Not like unheard of, but like just like the way she built up her audience, it's not really common, you know, for us. And so she started to like kind of build a relationship, because she's really into hockey romances, and she kind of started to fall in love with the sport. She built a relationship with the Seattle Krackens, I believe they're called, and she would react to their stuff and kind of associate her desire of these fictional hockey players to her desire of these real life hockey players who have wives and children and things like that. And you know, when I'm talking about this, I want to be clear that I don't think that this is all Kiera's doing, but I do think there's something to be said about how she responded to the whole situation. But I'm more so just giving you the background of everything, because I don't really have much to weigh on this situation. But there was this one response that I just really, really think is so important to share with you, and I just felt like was so kind and so compassionate and so telling. Yeah, she had this like really deep connection with, you know, not deep, but they kind of had like a mutual connection with each other. The Kraken's social media team and Kiera, they like flew her out to go to a game, and she had a sign that was like a play on the words, like break my back or something like that, and she did like crack my back or whatever type thing for the sign. And it was a funny sign. Like it was just it that seemed pretty innocent, but what was happening on the other side of that on social media, which I have seen a little bit of, is this over sexualization of the hockey players, to the point where one of the hockey players, Alex Winberg's wife, Felicia Winberg, made a statement, and in that statement she included a screenshot of like Kira's video, leaving her name and another person's name who was unidentifiable on the screen grab or the screenshot. And it created this like whole storm, this whole back and forth, and it was really awful. Honestly, to be honest, like I feel bad for Kira, and I feel bad for Alex and, you know, Felicia, because they had people commenting like really over sexualized things on their photos like that featured their child, and it was just like a really icky situation. And for me personally, I really felt like you know, the Seattle Krackens like social media team did everybody dirty, and they really, in the sense like Felicia, like, or not Felicia, Kira brought up this point aimed at the wrong person, but she brought up this thing of like a bigger brand attacking a Black creator. And in a way, I think what did happen was in fact a really big brand not caring about the results, and not being careful with how they handled this situation, because Kira is a Black female creator. And I think the way the brand would handle it, because the brand just essentially unfollowed her, deleted all the Booktok content, took Booktok out of their thing, basically shunned her, and didn't try to speak to her, didn't try to get to a mutual resolution, wasn't really respectful or professional in how they handled anything or how they communicated between the players and Kira specifically, because this is what the dynamic has turned into. They weren't cool to her. They weren't kind to her. They weren't considerate to her. And I have a feeling that if Kira was a white female influencer who was attractive, I mean, Kira's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, the standard like influencer girl, like if she was an Alex Earl, I feel like the way that would have been handled would have been differently, to the point where I feel like Felicia wouldn't have even had to make a statement if the team themselves actually went and spoke to Kira on behalf of the team. But that didn't happen. And so it became this like whole thing. And I think Kira unfortunately directed all of the anger out at people who were the victim. The thing is that like they were allowed to take back their consent at any time. And anyway, their consent at most was like really flimsy, because, you know, as a hockey player, they're under contract. They're under contract to participate in media, and they get fined and penalized if they don't participate. And so if this is what their social media team is doing, if this is what their social media team is allowing, they can't speak out about it. You know, like it had to get really bad to a point where, you know, a hockey player's wife stepped out and put her neck out there to say something, you know. And it's okay. I think it's fully okay that they rescinded their consent, especially because they were starting to impact, you know, their day-to-day lives. Apparently they were, you know, being flooded with this shit all the time. Like people were showing it, and then like fans were kind of bringing it up to them in like public events, and that's really uncomfortable. Like literally turning these people, these actual living, breathing people, into sexual objects. Like it's different when you're reading something versus, you know, you're like talking this way and like saying like, oh yeah, like fill my 3 holes, daddy, or whatever. What did she say? Someone said like something like they can like fill all 3 of her holes or something like that in one of the videos. And like that would be something that you could say to like someone that you can consensually say that to, but also someone who's fictional. Like, that's something that you would joke about a fictional character. That's not something that you would say to like an actual breathing person. And it was just really sad. Honestly, it was really sad, and I feel really bad for the husband and wife, because especially because like Kira got angry and she was like telling her followers to go after them, which she shouldn't have done. She absolutely should not have done. I don't. Oh, it's so bad. Like, because like then people were saying things about their marriage, which they don't know anything about. They're like assuming things about like Alex's and Felicia's marriage, saying that like, oh, like if your man's straying, that's like your fault. Like, that's this, that's that. Like, obviously you're having marital problems. It looks like he's hopping into people's DMs. It looks like he's doing this. It looks like he's doing that. That shit's crazy. People were acting mad out of pocket. They're acting mad crazy. That was just the most inappropriate, insane thing. And to be honest, and this might be an unpopular thing, but I do think that in that romance at this point is kind of having the same effect as porn. You know how like porn, it changes your brain chemistry, it changes the way you think about women. They have all those arguments about that. I think the same thing is happening with romance. And people are going to argue against me. They're going to be like, no, it's not like that because it's written by women. Well, women are acting like men. They're doing the same thing that men do to women all the time. And I think that's really sad. But something that I felt was a really beautiful response. So I'm going to go ahead and actually play this guy's plays for you, and then we'll talk about it.
I'm so fucking sick and tired of everything.
So, as gently as I can, this was always a brand deal, right? Whether it was a partnership, a tie-in, whatever they were calling it, it was always business. And I understand that you were upset because the way this was marketed fostered a kind of parasocial relationship in which you had different expectations, and those expectations have been violated. But here's where reality comes into play, and it is a cold, hard facts reality. His consent, if he ever really gave it, has been withdrawn. His wife's consent, again, if she ever really gave it, has been withdrawn. And the reason I say ever really gave it is that it sounds like they agreed to a marketing push, not to what followed that push, with fans saying things that were completely and wildly out of pocket. And I understand that you feel like you've been unfairly included in something that you didn't participate in, and maybe that's true. But also, frankly, it doesn't really matter, because the team will continue just fine. His career will continue just fine. Even the marketing person's career, fine. His wife's fine. Person who is currently at risk of damaging their career is you, because right now you come off as though you can't accept no for an answer, and you can't be professional about a business deal breaking down. If I were you, I would fix that for your own future, if nothing else.
What you just watched was Mickey Kendall, the author of Hood Feminism, who I think is the perfect person to weigh on this situation, because she's right. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong in this situation. Kira needs a bounce back. She needs a complete bounce back, and she needs to make sure that her career is okay. And to be honest, so the way I responded to this was kind of that of an older sibling. And I think it kind of gets like this in the Black community, where we can say certain things about certain people in certain ways, and other people cannot. It's like the same thing of like having like a younger sibling, where it's like I can word something in a certain way and say something to them, but you absolutely cannot. I can make that joke about them, but you absolutely cannot. And so the hype around the situation got so big that like hockey outlets are talking about it. People outside of Booktok are talking about it. People who I follow who have never heard of Booktok before are talking about it. They do pop culture. Like, they do pop culture about like Ariana Grande and like people like that, they don't talk about booktokers. But that's how big this situation has got, to the point where even some authors are weighing in. Nisha Sharma weighed in, obviously Mickey Kendall, Katee Robert, they all weighed in. And like as more and more people were weighing in, I started to notice a slight undertone that was being taken, and it's a little racist. Some things that were being said were just a little too close for comfort, and specific types of people on Booktok were getting a hold of it and saying certain things in certain ways. And I think because everyone was just enjoying on Kira's embarrassment, because Kira has a big ego. She is someone who has a big ego. Coming on a Booktok and claiming she's the queen of Booktok was not cute. It wasn't a good look, and it did not win any favors. Because that's just not what this whole community is about. But I think because she's so like ostracized in this community, or like a certain group of people just don't enjoy her, while making fun and making light of it, there is also like a sad side to it, where like you can tell when she was crying, like she was very much in distress. And I honestly feel bad for her. I mean, the shit that's going around and like the slight undertones that certain things are taking, I'm not feeling comfortable with. So for me personally, and on behalf of Oh That Girl Reads, because I am Oh That Girl Reads, I don't know why I said it like that. I do regret, and to a certain extent kind of feeding into the joking around of like about the situation. I mean, when it was smaller, it felt okay to do, and it felt okay to laugh at. But once it got bigger, and once it kind of took on like a certain tone, I feel really uncomfortable with how that went. And so I apologize to Kira and Alex and Felicia, not to the Krackens. Fuck the Krackens. Just for that. Like I mean, obviously I don't think they're gonna see it, but just like I really want to move with integrity in anything that I do. And I, at the very least, for me, if I can't help people, I don't want to cause more harm to them. And I think, without thinking about it, I did cause more harm by kind of contributing to a space where people think it's okay to dogpile on a Black woman and say certain things to her. Was she wrong? Yes, because like, I mean, I think one thing that was really disappointing from her was the fact that like she was kind of like, oh well, you're enjoying it, like that video is like 4 months old, like you were like benefiting off of the hype, and then all of a sudden it changed. Like for me, it's like consent can be taken at any time. It can change, things can change, and you say, okay, I'm sorry, like I will do better next time. That's what it is. And it's unfortunate sometimes when it does leave you in a position where you feel like you're not wrong. Like in this case, it's kind of like not really the fault of either parties involved. It's the fault of the marketing team. But it's really about how Kira needs to respond now. And I'm really hoping, because you know what? She did build a platform for herself. She did build an audience. And so as a Black woman to another Black woman, I just want to see her succeed. I want to see her, do greater things. Do I agree with her and a lot of the things that she does on her platforms and the things that she promotes on her platforms? No. But as a person, do I see the pain and probably the anxiety and the fear that she's facing while having like all of these eyes on her in a not so positive light? Yeah, I do. I empathize with that, and it makes me sad. And I really hope that she's kind of able to kind of move forward in all of that and really just reestablish herself. And and I want her to remember that like that her own community, the Black community, we can be rough. We can say things and do things and joke in a certain way that might make you feel ostracized, and I 100% get that, but really surround yourself with people, and this goes for anybody. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who will hold you accountable in a respectable manner. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who look at you, who see the good in you and want to see you become better, because those are the people who are going to bring you in, call you in, and help you before you make a mistake, before you are out on a ledge, before you're by yourself on an island. Because the people who are supporting you, they're supporting you, but know that some of those people, their support only goes for so long, and they obviously didn't call you in, and they're just blindly following your lead when, you know, you needed a little bit more guidance, and you needed someone to back you up and not be a yes man for you in that instance. And I think that's really important for anyone who's making, you know, content online. Having someone to help you build discernment is really important. And I really hope she ends up seeing Mickey Kendall's, you know, video response. I hope she ends up reading Mickey Kendall's Hood Feminism. I hope, you know, she ends up seeing the value in other parts of Booktok. I hope she sees value in like the Black community, the Black authors, the people of color. She has this idea that, you know, the stories made by marginalized voices aren't pleasant stories, and that's not true. You'll be surprised the amazing things that await you when you address the internalized racism and those awful stories that aren't true. Yeah, I know that's kind of like a heavier note to leave Oh That Girl Reads on, but I did want to talk about that. Just remember too, for those of you who are in like the book creator space, or who are just casually making book content but are being approached by companies and, you know, things like that, these companies are not your friends. They're not here for you. And so you need to remember to be your own PR person. You need to look out for your own self, really set boundaries with these companies, really communicate and look out for yourself. And honestly, lean on your community. You know, just find people that you trust. Because, you know, I mean, it's funny too, because like I have like a group of people with like Oh That Girl Reads too. Like I go to Brooke. I talk to Brooke about things. Dina has helped me a lot with things. She has talked me through like, you know, me just being overwhelmed and like, you know, just like falling apart. Brooke has kept me accountable and being like, yo, like relax, or like maybe like kick it up a notch, or like be more honest, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like I have people in my corner who are giving me feedback. I have like friends who are giving me feedback, and, you know, I allow you guys to give me feedback. And so just having people who are holding you accountable is a good thing. You do not want people around you who are constantly saying yes to you and constantly hyping you up. It's not good for your soul. It's not good for your ego, anything like that. But anyway, let me end this episode. I've been talking for so fucking long, and I think all of my devices are over it. So thank you guys for joining me today. I am so blessed to have you here. If you guys would like to hear more from me, you can follow Oh That Girl Reads on Instagram, on YouTube. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on TikTok, Oh That Girl Reads. Our podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And yeah, remember, read what you love and DNF the rest. And honestly, to add on to this, forget the bullshit too. I will talk to you guys later. Bye. So long, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. If you would like to see more, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Oh That Girl Reads. If you want more bookish content, feel free to check out my booktube channel, Bria L, on YouTube. Remember, read what you love and DNF the rest. Bye!